Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And today we're talking about updating out-of-print games or old games.
Okay,
Okay.
go.
So I was thinking, I've noticed quite a few Kickstarters and other games being written or created, and they're basically rewrite-ups or modernizations of older RPG.
Which I find most interesting because I recently noticed that a bunch of the movies that are coming out are
Or
re-updated old movies, like Jurassic Park, Top Gun, things like that.
Well, those are like added on. They're not like total reproductions. They're not like total like. There is that though. Well, what did they remake? They remade a lot of movies, but you're right. There is that. I don't know. Maybe we've reached a certain year that it's time to remake movies.
I think it was the pandemic. Everybody went, yeah, let's go back a little ways.
I don't know about that, but I think you're right. I think a lot of people our age and they look back and they go, "Oh, that was a good movie," and then they, even though this was done a while ago, like Footloose, right? Footloose is a great 1980s movie, so not about a great, but it's iconic, and they redid it a while ago, and those things continue.
What I meant was that the first game that you gave me to talk about is an updated version of, well, he doesn't use the name because he can't. It's called Mutants in the Now.
Right.
Which is an updated version or a, what do you want to call it? A
reimagining
creationing of, can I say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
I think you can.
Okay, because they're one of my favorites. I don't know about the game because it's kind of crunchy.
Well, I didn't know, but I always thought because I knew about Palladium, and Palladium is owned by Kevin Sambadia. If I butchered his last name, I'm sorry, but he developed Palladium role-playing system. It was a percentile system, and I always thought that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was created after a Palladium system game was out, but him and the creator of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness RPG, which was published in 1985, was the first one to use that system. Of course, the reason why is that Kevin and his name was Eric Woodchick. I don't know I butchered his last name. He passed away in 2007, but he were collaborating together. They were friends, and so obviously Eric Woodchick and Kevin Sambadia had. They knew each other, and I guess it was Kevin Sambadia got the rights to do the RPG for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Kevin Sambadia had the rights to do a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle RPG, and he had it done, but I guess he didn't like the way the freelancer wrote the rules. He got his friend Eric Witchick to do it in 5 weeks. Boom. That was
Well, from the rules that I've seen in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they're reminiscent of like space opera because it's a percentile system, right?
Right.
And there's charts. So when I looked at it, I was like, oh, I see.
And another thing, it's a real small system. I think it clocks in at 48 pages. And there's a little bit of art there, so it's very reminiscent of the comic.
It's a very 1985 roll book, too, because it looks like it was typed, literally.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the publishing industry back then, especially small, had to rely on, I don't know what they relied on, but you're right. It has that typed look to it. It was made in 1985. Eric Woodchick wrote it, basically used a precursor of what later would be Kevin Sambadia's, I guess call it the Megaverse system. I may be wrong on that one. But they used this system that Kevin Sambadia used in Palladium, in the big game that he's made is Rifts, but there's all kinds of games that use that same system where you have regular damage and mega damage and all this other stuff. So anyway, he wrote the book in 1980. I think the comics.
It was published in 1985.
86 or 85, I'm not sure.
85.
85. Which is pretty close to when Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird wrote the comics when they first started publishing it. So they wrote it and basically went out of print a few years later. They probably lost the license, and there hasn't been a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle RPG since.
Yeah, but it's been around, and I know people play it because I've watched them on, not watched them play it, but watched them talk about it on YouTube.
Right. So people still play it. Yeah. And it's
In fact, someone said it's one of their favorite games, and they've learned the system and taught it to all their friends.
well, in 1985, can you imagine if you're a young person,
A teenager
who's read the comic, or yeah, because there was no movie till 1990, I believe, and so you're looking at this fan base of comic kids, and they see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle RPG. They don't know what it is, but it looks like a comic. So because it kind of does look like a comic, and the art is very. I think it was done by Kevin Eastman and Laird, but we'll just say Eastman and Laird. I read a lot of reviews and stuff like that, and a lot of people were like, "This was the first non-D&D game I've ever bought," and we played it, or it was the first role-playing game they've ever bought because they didn't know what a role-playing game was, and they just liked that fact that it was Mutant
Ninja Turtles.
Yes, Mutant Ninja Turtles. Years later, I mean, that was 1985. Almost 40 years later, right? Getting close.
Yeah.
There still hasn't been another game with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And there's a big, if you look at the Eastman and Laird, shortly in the early 1990s, they got into a big fight. One of them, Laird, I believe, just sold the rights to Eastman. And then Eastman went on and started developing all these cartoons and made millions of dollars. And then he finally sold all the rights to some company, I forget what it is, for like $60 million, which doesn't seem like a lot these days because everything is like a lot of money. But can you consider how much toys and movies and cartoons they've made? That was a good investment. So anyway, so you have this game that a lot of people in the 80s, like, it's nostalgic, hits you in the gut if you think about it, because either you still play it, which is kind of rare, but because there's some problems to the mechanics, and there's some problems to this game if you play it exactly the way it was intended or the way it's written. For example, character creation is totally random, right? You randomize what animal you are, what mutations you have, what your background is, and that's straight, like you said, that's straight old style.
That's like Gamma World.
And the original D&D.
Yeah. Well, but Gamma World, because there's mutants and there's tables that you're rolling dice, because our friend Phil made us do, I think it was second edition
or third edition
Gamma World.
Yeah.
It was straight up it was like Traveler. You're
terrible.
rolling your dice and you're like, you don't know what you're going to get. I'm like, I don't like that.
We talked about it. I had a mutant that had a pretty cool ability. It was a mental ability.
Yes,
and
but you couldn't do anything with it.
And and at the time he had a high whatever you needed to use mental statistic. My mental statistic was pretty high, like a 15 or 17. But then I rolled a mutation that I was dumb.
Yeah.
So it killed my mental power down to like 9. So I had this cool mental blast, but every time I try to use it, everybody could make their saving throw because I was such a weak. So those are the crazy things that happen in that kind of character.
That's what happens when you use a random table
for everything,
for creating a character.
Everything.
I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah. So I remember making a ton of characters. When I got the book, and I don't remember when I bought this book. It was ages ago, and it wasn't new. I think I bought it used, so it was like in the mid '90s that I bought this book, and I made a bunch of characters, but I didn't follow the rules. I just like, ooh, this animal looks cool. I use this mutation. I use this.
Are you talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's what I did, and I thought it was pretty cool. And but another thing I didn't do is I never played the game. I just made characters for it, which is kind of sadly what I used to happen. But now I've been adamant about trying to games that are on my
shelf,
my shelf of shame, or shelves of shame. But I played a lot more lately, so I feel pretty good about that. There's hardly any games I haven't played.
So in the new version, or the new game, Mutants in the Now, a modern mutant animal Zine RPG.
Right, because I forget, it was on Kickstarter, and I think they were talking about there was a special program that they have where new creators could make a Zine or something like that. I don't know exactly, but anyway, so this guy called Jay, I forget his last name, Julian K, decided he was a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I guess he couldn't get the rights as I don't even know who owns the rights at this point. Well, if it's Teenage Mutant Ninja related, it's to that big company, whatever big company that was that bought the rights. And he loves the system, and he loves the system, and he loved the game, but it has some inherent problems, right? Character creation is one. Also, percentile system, the way the percentile system worked, it was kind of clunky. So he says he's updated it.
Oh, he says that now it's a D20 in combat and saves. You roll percentile dice for skills, but the mechanics are more universal, meaning there's less cross-referencing, which is probably a good thing because lots of charts is very difficult. It's not difficult as in hard to do. It's difficult as in time-consuming and kind of takes away from
actual playing.
Yeah. And he says he made the rules clearer.
That's always good.
Progressive twists here and there. No beauty attribute, which in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a thing, right?
Right.
And no intelligence, or there is intelligence, but it's the ability to understand human systems and technology. That's what the intelligence is.
Right.
It's not measured by your IQ. He's specifically pointing that out. I'm assuming there was something in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that was a bad thing for that.
Well, not a bad thing, but it was very, I don't know how to say it. Well, the creator, Eric Witchick, had some strange ideas, and it's glad that it's called Teenage Mutant Ninjas and Other Strangeness, because some things he included in that book were indeed strange and kind of odd. And in modern sensibilities, it was almost, what do you call it?
Unacceptable
To a certain extent. Like, for example, you had a table of, like if you had a trauma score, and if you get trauma from seeing somebody getting stabbed and stuff like that. So you get to roll on this trauma table, and then you have a possibility of developing a mental problem.
Oh my God, that's Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, but some things on this list were kind of weird,
Okay.
right? Like if you rolled a certain number, you would become a psychiatrist. So he kind of gives you an idea of what he thought about psychiatrists. Another mental problem in his book was that you used to roll a certain person and you would be gay. So obviously, he had some issues about stuff like that. And whatever your political beliefs are, considering those things as mental problems that theoretically could be solved or fixed is definitely problematic. Back then, probably people didn't really care or didn't realize what he was or thought it was funny or whatever. But today, it's a little bit more, now that we understand people's trauma and people understand how difficult it is to deal with stuff, you probably shouldn't make fun of it in a game. And then he goes on, and then he had a chart about alcoholism and addiction, and it was very detailed, oddly detailed. So maybe he was trying to,
he was working out his issues.
Yes, and he was working out his issues, and it comes out in this game, right? So Julian Kay, this new guy, goes, "Well, I'm going to get rid of all that. We don't want that. It's not. We want it to be inclusive as we can, and have it fun and not be divisive." So I think that's a good idea. And the weird thing is that like he's obviously looking at Teenage Mutant Ninja as the model for what he's creating. But he can't mention it because he's
right.
He goes to great lengths to avoid it in his Kickstarter page, and I guess he hasn't been sued. But I don't even know if the parent company would know about this little guy who's making this small book.
Well, he says that his game is tied to these famous turtles that he can't mention. So,
which was another thing is that like when you updated it, right? He's included Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You didn't just play You didn't just play turtles. You could play skunks and weasels and other animals that were mutated and changed. And I really liked the idea of that original idea that the mutation would mutate in stages, where you were slightly, like if you were only one mutation step, you would have you kind of looked turtle-ish, but you were still human. And then you would have obviously you were a mutant somehow because you were like bipedal and you could talk, but you were like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then you were like almost a full turtle that had difficulty talking, and then actual like the animal pretty close. So I thought it was really neat. I thought it was really cool. And I made a weasel and a bat one, and I made tons of characters. But in this update, he's added a lot of more but animals to mutate. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay.
So we're looking at we were thinking about the idea of buying or why would somebody want something like that updated. And in this case, because the game is so old and obviously has some problems, but mechanically in character creation and in issue wise, this person, Julian Kay, did a great job of updating it, changing it, and making it more inclusive and making it more fun, because now he includes a lot more animals that weren't included in the original book. Remember, the original book was 48 pages. His updated version is 120 pages. So he included quite a few more animals and stuff, and he has his own background as to what's going on in the world. I thought it was pretty neat little set of rules.
I see.
So it inspired him to do another one called Mutants in the Future or something like that, where it's like post-apocalyptic. And he kickstarted that, and it was successful as far as I looked at. So looking back at this old book that I remember reading and watching, not reading and making characters for, and something I wanted to play, because it looked definitely playable, and it looked like there was quite a bit of fun that you could have. And now this guy Julian Kay has made a modern version that is probably easier to get into, right? Easier to make a character that you want to play.
Easier, to play with
right,
the
and
rules,
to actually play the
rules,
system.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, and I can understand why somebody would do that. I mean, makes sense.
Were you questioning whether it made sense or not?
I don't know if I was questioning whether it makes sense, but is it something that was necessary? And in this case, I think it was. I think because
necessary is a very interesting word there, dude.
Necessary. Oh, you're right. I don't want to say necessary, but it's a welcome addition to the role-playing game library.
Yes, he got his Kickstarter for that one got like double, but he was only asking for like $2,000.
Yeah, and I think that's neat. I think that's neat when somebody, and then you could say, well, why don't you could just play it yourself? Why play the old style game? And if you want to ignore all the bad stuff, that's fine, and you could. But the system is quite clunky, right? It's quite.
That's why I said it reminded me of Space Opera, because that's a very clunky system. I mean, that's a very, and Saul and Felipe kind of, made charts and stuff for people, so it would be easier lists of this is what happens and that kind of thing. So it's easier to play,
right,
without having to bend your brain to try to figure out the rules.
Yes. So I think it's pretty cool. I think in this case, I mean, you could do it yourself, but Julian Kay I don't know how much the book is. You could probably buy the PDF pretty cheaply. So I think it's pretty cool that somebody has done that for you. If you want to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, scratch off the actual TMNT and
it's called Mutants in the Now.
Yeah, you just scratch off the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle part and play. You can still play Teenage Mutant Ninja.
You can play any mutated animal,
right,
or any
cool.
mutated whatever.
Rocky the Squirrel or something.
Yeah.
So I think you could do it yourself, but it's a lot of work if you ever try to homebrew or house rule an old game. Julian Kay's done it for you, and he's added all kinds of stuff.
There were other games you wanted to discuss.
Yes, and I think it's kind of an interesting trend. I see this Kickstarter for Everyday Heroes. Yeah, I think it's already ended, but on Kickstarter. But it is basically a 5th edition version of D20 Modern, which was I forget when that was published, but it was one of the first published ones by Wizards of the Coast, using the
open license,
open gaming license, and though it was made by Wizards of the Coast, so they can do anything they want, right? They own the license. So it was a 3rd edition version, a 3rd edition modern game, using the rules of 3rd edition, and you play. It was play a modern game. You could play spies. You could play whatever you want in modern days. So it was really neat. I don't know how popular it was. I remember seeing the book. And in fact, we
have the book.
I have the book somewhere. And they made a few supplements for it. They made like a supplement for World War II. They made a supplement for Future. So though it was kind of supported, but then it just kind of died out and quickly kind of went out of print, even before the D20 craze was over. Right before fourth edition came out, I don't think the D20 Modern had a lot of supplements toward the end of the third edition line.
Well, it's mostly like military. I mean, it's like you're a mercenary or a military person, right?
Well, yeah, you can make any kind of modern type of character, and it used instead of what is it? Instead of character classes, they used the fast character, which was based on dexterity, the tough character that was based on constitution, and so on. Right, the brain that was based on intelligence. So it was all based on the 6 attributes: intelligence, charisma, blah 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 blah. And then you got certain feats and stuff like that, and it was a very playable version of third edition if you want to play in the modern world. But third edition is very crunchy, right? Imagine the skill list that freaking game had, and it mirrored the skill list of third edition, which I forget how many skills that game had, but it had quite a few. And then they had the idea of cross-class skills.
So someone has updated this?
So zoom forward to 2022. Is it 2022? Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And Evil Genius Games decided that it was time for a modernization of D20 Modern. And they called it Everyday Heroes. And, of course, they used the 5th edition rules. And we've talked about 5th edition and how it's like just smashing all kinds of records of how many people are playing.
Well, because it's streamlined things like the skills. I mean, it's still D&D.
Yeah, still D&D, but it's a pretty good system if you want. I mean, I don't know. Everybody has opinions, right? Whether 5th edition is a good system. There's people who don't like it.
I like it,
and it goes. People like I only play 2nd edition and stuff like that, right? So I understand that, but it is a pretty good system. It's not as crunchy as any of the systems before it. It has streamlined quite a bit. It doesn't have as many skills as 3rd edition. There's no, you get +5 for this, +3 for this, +3, -3 for that. They do away with all that with the whole advantage and disadvantage system. So it's streamlined, and whether you like that or not, it's definitely more easy.
It makes it easier to play.
Easier to play, right? So you, on that basis alone.
And by easier to play, I mean it takes less time to do stuff than, like even if you're in combat, you don't have to think about how many pluses do I have,
right?
Because you have to keep like a list of, okay, if I'm going to do this, these are my advantages, right? Or these are my disadvantages, and you have to remember that. Where if it's an advantage disadvantage, you're just rolling the D20, and
maybe twice, right?
Yeah.
So Everyday Heroes takes ideas takes D20 Modern and fits it to 5th edition rules. And I think that's a great idea because, like I said, D20 Modern is a 3rd edition, so not a lot of people still play 3rd edition. It was never updated to 3.5, which is a slightly less problematic. It has, there's a lot of errors in 3rd edition. 3.5 fixed a lot of the incoherent rules that kind of clashed with each other, didn't make much sense. And there's a ton of skills, right? And so what you do with 5th edition is they get rid of a lot of those skills.
Or they combine them, right?
And they combine them, right. And it makes sense. And you have a smoother running game, and you can play in a modern game, which a lot of people like playing like modern.
Does it have magic? Not really.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think so either.
There's no magic component. Though, it's 5th edition, so you could throw a sorcerer in there or wizard if you want to. I don't think it'd be out of completely hard to do at all.
So if it's D modern, what are the monsters? They're not like D&D monsters, right?
Well, there's no monsters. You're playing.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So there's less magic.
Oh yeah, there's probably no magic in.
That's what I'm saying.
There might be like
you could use it to play like 007 stuff, right?
Right. But so in D20 Modern, they had a D20 Modern Urban Arcana, which was for, what do you call that? Urban fantasy.
Yes.
So they did. I mean, it was very. Wizards of the Coast were very cognizant of the idea of modern fantasies being very popular. urban fantasy being popular. Dresden Files.
It's a very good genre.
Right. And now it's very popular, and it has been for at least 20 years.
It's been very popular even longer than that, too.
So, well, for me, is this when I discovered this, when obviously the world found out about urban fantasy. So I am sure that he has, the people making this game have ideas for that. But what they have done, another weird, interesting take, is instead of right off the bat doing a urban fantasy setting rules edition, they have these adventure books that are based on movies. And what I guess it's kind of like the Everyday Heroes, I'm imagining, is kind of like Savage Worlds, where depending on the setting, you use different rules or different skills or whatever. You know what I mean? For example, they have, and it's a long list of movies tie-ins that they have with this Everyday Heroes. They have like Highlander, they have Rambo, they have and a bunch of ones I can't remember right now. But there's all these, and so these settings change like the rules a little bit, or add rules or skills or whatever, so you can run that game, your adventure in that world or in that setting, and everything's done for you according to what I've read. So it's kind of like Savage Worlds, where you have the basic rules, which Everyday Heroes is, and then depending on the setting that you want to attach, you have different settings, and you run the game, and it changes the game a little bit in here or there that makes it run in that setting easier. So Highlander, a little bit of a
or that magic, would be a magic
component in there. So,
but you could run it like Feng Shui, right? Like, or you would be running it you could run a Feng Shui game.
I'm sure you could, with the Highlander setting, because it's kind of like.
I wasn't thinking of Highlander. I was thinking of like just the Everyday Heroes.
Oh, Everyday Heroes. Except I don't know how much magic components there is in the core book. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess Feng Shui does have magic because that's part of it. And from other times and stuff, and other dimensions.
So I think it's pretty interesting. Like I said, a lot of people liked D20 Modern, and it probably isn't played as much because 5th edition is really popular, and there has been other attempts to make a modern 5th edition rule book, but they haven't had this kind of what I would say pedigree, because they got some people who worked on the actual 3rd edition rules. And I think they're taking it from a very interesting angle of developing a modern game that you could play with, and then you add your setting rules on top of that, and then you play the game. And I think that's pretty interesting. I'm sure there probably is an urban fantasy.
Well,
but right now
they have like cinematic adventures, right?
Right.
So they have the Universal Soldier.
Okay.
So they introduce cybernetics, right?
Ah, yes.
Total Recall.
Right. Slightly future. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something for everyone, it says.
Right. And that's interesting because, like I said, they got a lot of movie tie-ins, and if you get the movie, you got to get the right.
They even have Kong and the terrible. Different
King Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So it's very cinematic ideas, right?
Right. So tied to these movies that are real, are iconic in people's.
I think some people really like that kind of setting.
Oh heck yeah, like Highlander.
Yeah.
People like that movie.
I like Highlander, but I don't know about playing it.
Yeah, well, that's just another thing. Is like, we wonder what you would play in that one. Because it can only be one.
That's exactly it. I mean,
well, maybe you played before, right? In the before time.
Yeah.
Before
there were a bunch of people running around cutting
Lambert
off.
was the only one left, right? So I think that's interesting. Rambo, you got this movie based on one person. I don't know how you're going to play a whole team of Rambos. Who knows? But I think it's interesting. I think it is interesting. But I think it's more interesting. I think it's all that's interesting, and that the fact that they got the rights to do all these movies as RPG supplements.
Well, yeah.
Some of these are older, right? Rambo is old. Kong, I don't even know which Kong
Oh,
refers
so
to.
you could do spy thriller, Navy SEA rescue, or murder mystery just
Right.
from the core rule book.
Just from the core book.
And then they got 8 different cinematic adventures. So
Planned, right?
so that's pretty. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So if you like fifth edition and you want to play a modern game, and like I said, there's been other versions of this modern setting. In fact, we used one for our big game. That was what, 5 years ago, 6 years
I thought
ago?
we used D20 Modern.
No. D20 Modern is a third edition book.
Oh, you got a 5th edition one.
Yeah, I got something.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I forget what
It's been a while.
called.
It said modern on it. That's all I know.
It did say modern, but it wasn't D20 Modern.
I'm just saying it said modern, and
I think it was. Oh my God, can I see it?
it's okay. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, we're not talking about that one. So there have been other iterations of 5th edition modern rules. This is what I'm just going to say. But Everyday Heroes takes a different tact, and it looks like it did pretty well in the Kickstarter. So it's probably did better than the previous version.
It did very well.
Yeah,
Yeah, they were asking for
30,000.
15,000,
Oh.
and they got 395,000.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's closed yet or not.
Yes, it closed a couple days. Well, before the weekend.
Okay.
Here you go. You had D20 320 Modern is out of print. You
Yeah.
can't make. They don't make them, print them anymore. Now you can get probably the PDFs because Wizards of the Coast have opened up their entire line of everything they own, and you can buy it on PDF. But a lot of people like Dead Tree versions and like that book in their hand. And I looked at D20 Modern books, and they ranged from in the used market.
I'm sorry, did you say dead tree versions?
Yes, Dead Tree.
I don't think you should use that term.
Paper. So I guess some paper's not dead tree. So sorry about you tree huggers up there. But anyway, but I like having books. I mean, I you know that I have.
Yeah, I can tell by the bookcases surrounding me.
I mean, I have like 2,000 PDFs, and Jolie makes fun of me for that. But
I think you have more than that.
No, I think a little bit more.
Literally, people say, I heard about this, and Sal goes, oh, I think I have that PDF. Let me look.
Anyway, so yeah, and because if you go onto your account on Drive Thru RPG, it says you have not reviewed 2,343 items on your list. I think I've only reviewed 2 or 3 of them. I should review more.
No.
Just as a little blurb. Anyway, so Everyday Heroes. Everyday Heroes is a reimagining of D20 Modern, and I think it's pretty cool. I am dead. What is not dead serious? I would say this doesn't make sense. I am pretty sure they're gonna make an urban fantasy version of this game or a supplement, and because, like you said, it's such a popular setting.
Well, yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if they can make it seems like they want to tie into a movie or to.
Well, I mean, like cyberpunk stuff is really cool now. I mean,
right.
So that's a tie-in, and then
right,
and then any kind of movie that they have 8 cinematic adventures things. So any movie that people like,
right,
is a way to get them to play. Right?
Of course, yeah, to draw them in.
Yeah.
So there is other urban fantasies other than the Dresden Files that they could probably look into.
Oh yeah.
There's the Iron.
Oh God, he's
Iron
thinking.
Druid. I think is.
I don't think we should let him think and talk at the same time.
That's not nice. And there's plenty of others, and I think it'd be interesting to include that kind of setting into this game. Why are you laughing at me?
Because you're funny. There was one more you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, but we're running a little bit long, so I'll just mention there's a lot of retro clones games of D&D, and there's different versions of D&D that they're cloning. There's clones of original D&D. There's clones of the Red Box. There's clones of AD&D, and they all want to fit a certain niche. I think, like they all want to look at those, and they look at those systems and try to modernize them a little bit and change them so they're a little bit more playable. For example, Low Life Fantasy mixes like old original D&D with with 5th edition, and they kind of use elements of both. One, to make the game run smoother, and two, to
update the terms.
The terms, but also still give you that flavor, right? And then you have like the white box, white star, or something like that, which is also a white box. Does the white box, but it basically just tries to play original D&D. Like original D&D, rewrite the rules, make it the rules clearer, because original D&D.
So that would be like OSR.
Yes, it's OSR, right? This is all OSR stuff, old school Renaissance, whatever you want to call it. And there's like OSRIC. I forget what it stands for. It's a bunch of letters that stand for something, but everybody shortens it to OSRIC, which basically takes.
You need to talk slower.
Which takes AD&D, and they basically tear AD&D apart, and they put it together in a much more understandable and a little bit concise version of the rules. So it takes all the three books. I don't think it takes the Monster Manual, but it takes the Game Master book and the Dungeon
Player's
Handbook,
Handbook.
the Player's Handbook, and it gives you all the rules. And they literally tore the rules apart and then put them back together, updated it, and what do you call it when you not update it, but what do you call it when not update, but when you you're laughing at me. Anyway, so Osric does that. I heard it's
maybe we could talk about this on a different episode.
No, I think it's good here.
Okay,
but what I'm saying is that all these have in common is that they look at old games and they try to bring them into a modern,
an updated, more playable version,
right?
In their opinion,
of course. And I think that's pretty cool. Instead of trying to find a book, like if you're trying to find old original D&D.
Instead of making like a 18th edition, they're,
well, instead of like
a lot of them lost the rights or they're out of print, so they're redoing stuff,
right?
Making it more modern film.
and more easier to get,
and be able to play.
Right, like if you wanted the physical books of original D&D, they're probably pretty pricey. I think even like the latest editions, they're like $300-$400. So that might be a problem for some people, right? And then you have to.
Well, and if you spend that much on it, are you really going to want to open that white box and pull out those little books?
Well, I'm sure they're probably used, but yeah.
I know, but then you're decreasing the value of it.
Yeah, you probably don't want to tear them apart and fold them backwards and stuff. But even that, the rules themselves are kind of clunky and hard to understand by today's modern reader, right? I don't remember being that difficult, but again, I don't remember reading those rules as much as like Felipe just told me what the rules were.
See, that made it a lot easier for you. Felipe read them and explained it to you.
Yes. So I think that's pretty cool. I think revisiting old games, updating them, making them more playable, bringing them to a new audience, I think that's pretty cool. Julian Kay's work has a lot of people praising it. I haven't really looked at the rules to play it, but I thumbed through the PDF and it was pretty cool. It's a really neat system. Everyday Heroes, they have a quick start available. It's going to get published. If you didn't get on the Kickstarter, you could probably do like a pre-order or backer kit thing. It looks pretty neat. I think it's something you should look at if you want to play a 5th edition modern game. And of course, there's all those retro clones out there. Have your pick. There's quite a few of them, and they all try to do something different, right? Like Low Life Fantasy tries to be a more grittier D&D game. You only have levels 1 through 10. You don't get a lot of hit points after third level. You only get 1 hit point per level, so your characters are more fragile and more easy prone to death. And I think that's an interesting take. And if that's the kind of game you want, there you go.
There you go.
There you go. So go out there and support these people. They're doing the stellar job of updating old games and making them playable for today's generation and beyond.
This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.